Welcome. We'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Tara, would you lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Just a reminder of the emergency exits, the door you came in and the door in the rear. In case of an emergency, please listen to staff and leave in an orderly fashion through these exits. This is a smoke-free and a vape-free school district. Smoking and vaping are not permitted in the building or anywhere on school grounds. This is a hate-free and a bully-free school district. Okay, moving on to item B, the introduction of board candidates. I'll read all the names. If you're here, I see 3 of you. Please stand, and we'll hold applause till the end. Joseph Barry, Erica Calderon, Robert Felicetta, no, Daniel Fitzgerald, and Christopher Ross. Okay? 3 out of your 5 candidates. Thank you. Moving on to item C, the budget presentation. You're up.
Thank you, Board. So today's budget hearing is basically the retelling of the sort of budget process in a different format. New York State mandates that we present the budget in 3 different parts, which I'll get to in a second. So I'll get just right to it. Basically, again, I'd like to highlight our budget sort of process calendar, which started back in January. Actually, the budget process for us starts back in November of the school year. And is ongoing through this hearing. It's basically the last presentation we'll here in district office. I do have one more scheduled, what we call budget roadshows in the next couple of weeks, but we'll culminate in our budget vote and election. I wish all candidates luck on May 20th, 2025. Throughout this process, we started on, like I said, in January. We talked about sort of the challenges and strategies to meet those challenges. We talked about the discrepancy in state aid, or rather the drop in state aid, the discrepancy in bond payments with our the drop in state aid, or building aid, I should say. We were sort of aware of some other sort of challenges that we were facing, but you know, as I go into the process, other things sort of came to light as we underwent this process. And again, the strategies that we were looking to use is strategic use of reserves and the continual engagement in capital reserve projects, because again, capital projects generate revenue in the form of building aid, and we hadn't really engaged in sort of capital projects for some time now, so we wanted to make sure that became sort of a focus of our strategies moving forward. And as always, we look at reducing expenditures. Our second meeting, which was held in the beginning of February, talked about the 8-point formula, or 8-part formula that calculates our tax levy limit, which landed at 3.48%. And we presented the final tax levy at the April 23rd DOE meeting, which I'll get to in a second. Our third meeting, which was in late February, talked about the budget codes that covered administration, transportation, and unallocated, which are debt payments and employee benefits, et cetera, which was followed by a board presentation at the beginning of March, when we went over the 2000 code, which is our largest sort of code, represents almost half of our budget, and this is all curriculum and instruction that covers everything from our classroom instruction to extracurricular activities and athletics. Then we did our staffing presentation. It was in between sort of like the first February presentation when we started getting contracts and sort of projected costs that we started realizing that some of these costs were increasing in an exorbitant amount, namely transportation, our healthcare, and special education, because we have more and more families moving into the district, despite our overall declining enrollment, that require special education services, and those children come with costs associated with their education. And I want to emphasize again, we love to support those kids, so what I'm saying is not meant to be taken in any negative fashion. It's just there's costs associated with that population of students. And so when we engaged in our revenue and expenditure update, which was at the beginning of April, we realized that even with all the line items that we have reduced, with our initial proposals for staffing reductions, there was still a $3 million budgetary gap that we had to address. And we went back to the drawing board and we looked at further sort of reductions in budget lines. But the premise was, what do we do to not affect any programs. The idea was to maintain all of our programs, even if they get delivered a little differently, but we wanted to make sure we didn't chip away at any of the academic programs. So when we returned on April 23rd, we gave the final sort of presentation. At this point, we gave our final proposals for our staffing cuts to sort of lessen that gap, and we proposed a budget that was right at the tax levy limit, which is 3.4%. It's an increase of about $2.4 million when you compare the tax levy to the tax levy. And again, the tax levy is the portion of our revenue that comes from the taxpayers. So we're also appropriated a little bit more of our fund balance towards next year's budget, as well as more use of our reserves in a strategic manner. When you look at our budget lines, budget to budget comparatively, we're looking at a 2.87% increase. That's comparing the overall budget to the overall budget. And again, the final proposed tax levy was 3.48%, which is the cap, which requires a simple majority vote to pass. So that was our budget proposal. So now, New York State asks that we present it a little bit differently. First, we need to publish our property tax report card. I don't expect anybody to read anything here, but these figures will be shown in later slides. It basically includes the percent change in spending in the general fund. That's the budget increase that I talked about, which is 2.87%. It talks about our tax levy limit, including the allowable exclusions, pilot payments or exclusions, for example. Then it also includes a percent change in the proposed levy compared to the prior year, and that proposed change was a 3.48%, which is our tax levy that we're asking our community to vote on. It includes our enrollment, which at the time that the property tax report card was generated, I believe it's 3,755 students, and it includes all of our fund balance and reserves. So this property tax report card is printed in the budget newsletter. We expect that newsletter to arrive in people's homes on Tuesday at the latest. It's at the printer, it's going to the post office on Friday, so our expectation is at latest Tuesday delivery, which gives people ample time to look it over. Also included, we just wanted to share sort of projected fund balances in our respective reserves. Again, we submit this to New York State based on our current standing at the time we submit this, which is March 31st. And we always are required by this deadline to share our projected reserve balances. So those are our projected fund balances at the end of this last school year. Moving on to the three-part budget, so basically New York State mandates that we present the budget in three different parts. The administrative component, which represents almost 12% of our budget, or 11.8%, that includes curriculum development, staff development, in-service development, personnel, district audits, central printing and mailing, and district votes. So those expenses are included in the administrative costs. We also have to print our capital expenses that represent almost 15% of our budget, and those are facilities costs, debt services, operations and maintenance, supplies, utilities, and personnel related to those areas. And finally, the biggest component of our budget is the program expenses, and that's student services, instructional support, transportation, and instructional salaries and benefits. So that's really almost, it's a little over 73% of our budget represented there. And all this information that we're going to share, and I'm going to break down each of these component areas in a second, but all of this information is consistent to the budget that's been presented already. None of the information has changed. So when we go to the administrative component of our expenditures, you notice that from year to year, we're looking at an overall increase in this area, about $150,000, which is really low. We really worked hard to sort of reduce a lot of the budget lines in this area. I do want to point out that the Board of Education expenses, board members work for free, but this includes the district clerk salary, the cost of elections and advertising, and everything that is associated with the functioning of the board, but no salaries. Oops. And so, but that basically, a little too far. So those are administrative expenses altogether. We're looking at an increase of about $150,000 comparing budget to budget. Overall, in this category, we spend about a little over $17 million. Next are the capital expenses. This was reduced by $39,000. It's kind of a little misleading because we removed the transfer to capital line. The transfer to capital line was an extra $1 million that we had inserted in our general budget, in our general fund, to allow us to do capital work on an ongoing basis. The reason we removed it is because it raises the tax levy limit, And those funds, that $1 million, cannot be used to offset operational expenses, including salaries. So we felt that, you know, we have to keep our taxpayers in mind, so we didn't want to sort of elevate our tax levy in a manner that would not help us save positions or help cover the cost of operations. We're still committed to our, you know, working on capital improvement projects, and just for informational sake, we're going to be breaking ground on some capital projects this summer, which includes the windows at Critz Elementary School, finally the high school auditorium, it's going to be gutted right after graduation. Our energy performance contract, which I'll talk a little bit, when you look at the dramatic increase in the operations of the plant, it's almost a $700,000 increase. Those are operating costs that are going up, include fuel, maintenance, and repairs. So again, this is why we're going to get engaged in these capital improvement projects, because the cost of maintaining and repair buildings are becoming astronomical. And so we're also proposing a capital reserve vote to repair the high school track, as well as gymnasium windows and 2 boilers at the high school. The boilers are in disrepair, and again, the cost of maintaining them are getting sort of outrageous. So, and I want to emphasize that all this capital work is coming from funds that are in our general fund, in the reserves, and that have no impact on the tax levy or on the taxpayers. So we're looking to continue that work, because ultimately, this work is state aidable, and again, like I said before, it generates building aid revenue. Finally, program expenses is basically the hugest component. It's almost 73% of our budget. Increases in instruction are basically incremental increases in salaries, and it's inclusive of all the proposed staffing reductions. So even with those staffing reductions, we're looking at almost an $850,000 increase in that component of our budget. Contract transportation we talked about, we're looking at an increase of about $1.4 million year to year. And employee benefits embedded in there is the increases in healthcare, which also represented another $1.7 million. So this really was the biggest area of increases that we sort of observed during the budgetary process. So at almost $4 million just in this component. And the transportation expense or employee benefits, that's not the total increase, because some of those benefits are included in the other component areas. Because if the personnel, for example, associated with operations or maintenance, if their salaries and benefits are there, it's included in that other component, which is what I mentioned in that last bullet point. So finally, I get back to the final proposed budget. Again, we're proposing a budget with a tax levy at 3.48%, which is basically right at our tax levy limit, which requires a simple majority vote. And compared budget to budget, it's a 2.87% increase. Now the question is, you know, what happens if the budget should fail? And so I want to make sure I shared what happens in a contingency budget. The school district could propose another budget should it not pass on May 20th. But I want to assure the trustees and community watching that there is no other scenario, a budget proposal, that's going to eliminate the need to reduce staff. So that, regardless of what happens, is sort of a reality that we have to deal with, as difficult as it is. Underneath the contingent budget, however, state mandates that you basically give, your tax levy has to be flat. So if you look at it, our tax levy for this current year was a little over $69 million. The difference between the proposed tax levy is $2.4 million. So that's what we would have to cut additionally from the budget. Some of those cuts are mandated by the state. So anything that's contingent, meaning not necessary, according to your state, gets cut, which includes equipment, workstations, desktops for computers, Chromebooks. We're refreshing in Chromebooks, we're replacing Chromebooks for students, any new furniture, athletic and field trip transportation needs to be eliminated, athletic uniforms, co-curricular clubs and activities, grad program, new courses at the high school we would not be able to offer, and additional staff reductions are included in other discretionary items. Basically, contingent budgets are pretty devastating for school districts. And so, again, it's important that we support the school districts so we can maintain our programs and continue providing the quality instruction that we sort of are striving for. And again, what's going to be on the ballot is going to be proposition number 1, which is the authorization of the proposed tax levy increase of 3.48%. There's going to be a vote to use our capital reserve, a little over $2.3 million. Hey, Mr. Filicelli, you can come in. And there's also going to be the ballot for the election of the trustees. I do want to introduce Mr. Filicelli, who's one of our candidates as well. And that concludes my budget hearing presentation. Again, our budget vote and trustee elections on May 20th. I encourage as many people to come out and vote. If you have any questions.
Trustees, questions?
Yes,
Ms. Felice?
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Santana, and thank you for sending the backup information as requested for the slide. So I'll start with slide number 8. There's some assumptions in here of salary increases that normally aren't considered until the reorg meeting. So I'm assuming you're just putting in there to, to prepare. And I don't want to assume that that means they're approved, because they would have to first come before the Board of Education.
So I think in this category, we're talking about legal services primarily or contractual services?
I'll get to legal services first. No, some of the, and I don't want to talk about personnel in public portion, but there's some personnel expenses that were in here that were, in fact, in all the lines. But I just want to, your assurances that if there's lines that were budgeted for, that you're planning on considering asking the board, approving this budget doesn't mean it's an assumption that they're going to be granted until the board approves them.
That's 100% correct.
Okay.
So you still have to budget for it, but we can't make any changes to any salaries without board approval.
Okay, thank you.
And that happens, I'm sorry, that happens always. We always, especially contracts, right, we always build in increases that we anticipate even if they're not settled.
Okay, yep, and now we're just looking at them. So with respect to that, and during budget crises in the past, we have always asked some of our consultants to accept a 0 wage increase for those contracts, namely the legal counsel. And I was on this board when I requested to do the same, and they responded in kind. So I see that we do have increase to contracts for those legals, for auditors, built into the lines that are associated with, especially the lines in slide number 8. And I would ask, have we considered asking those consultants to consider a 0 wage increase?
Yeah, so when we go down to the table and we discuss contracts, we're going to ask for multiple considerations. And a lot of the work is ongoing, so but you have to make allocations in the budget to make sure we're covered in any sort of scenario. But even when I speak, we're still looking at like transportation routes, for example, and looking at efficiencies there. Again, the idea is, when you adopt a budget, it's not to spend the money allocated, it's to spend as much as needed to run the district in an efficient manner. And if you cut expenditures, we always want to cut expenditures to make sure that there is a cushion in case of unfortunate events in the budget. But absolutely, as we renegotiate contracts with all of our consultants, legal services, we basically communicate where we're at.
Okay, good. Just want some assurances that those efforts are being made. Thank you. You mentioned too, with the contingency budget, the contingency budgets would mean no furniture purchases.
Correct.
And I see in here too, we have some listing of furniture purchases in this particular budget. So with respect to those people who are looking for middle school in, for example, there's $1,000 listed for purchase in a middle school, $4,000 for high school. I don't know if you have the specifics of what they're for, and then there's another line, one of the other slides, we'll get to that when we get to those slides, but there was approximately a $15,000 purchase for furniture. I don't know if that's to do with, students.
It's students, you have to replace student desks, you have to do bookshelves, all those types of things. So it's, that's kind of ongoing, it's an expense we always have. But under a contingent budget, you're not allowed to spend on anything that's new.
Okay.
In that category, furniture, I should say.
Okay. Also, one of the questions I had earlier in the budget process, I'd like to see us really minimize the conferences that we go to also minimize the costs in going through, a year that we're having particular struggles. I see that you didn't increase the lines a lot, so I appreciate that you did pay attention to that, and that we would do that accordingly. If there's a opportunity for virtual attendance, I would like to see us do that instead. So I do appreciate, I see there's an effort that's been made for that accordingly. So that was slide number 8. So thank you for that. I have 2 more slides, but I'll give an opportunity to the other
Why don't you
one.
just finish them?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So slide number 9. And I did have this conversation with the superintendent earlier, but I'd like you, if you don't mind, Mrs. Santana, if you would just explain, one of the lines that did have a significant increase to it showed a $70,000 increase to operations of plant for health and safety. It's a BOCES line, but you did explain that it results in changing that line so that it's aidable.
So that's
Can
a
you
contract.
speak to that?
Yeah, that's a contract. We have EnviroScience, which does, surveys and does environmental studies. So we used to pay them directly. Now we're paying them through BOCES, which means we get aid back. So wherever we can, that's another sort of cost-saving measures that we've been doing, because you save costs indirectly, is contract through BOCES as much as you can. There is a small BOCES fee, but you get aid back on those contracts. So we shifted the EnviroScience contract from contract and services to that BOCES line, and that's what is represented there.
Okay. And that was a line that was once budgeted at $25,000. Now it'll be budgeted at $95,000. But the $95,000 will be aidable at 1%.
I believe it's somewhere near like 60%.
Okay, where the $25,000 wasn't aidable at all.
No, BOCES is always aidable, but the 70 additional that was on the other line was not aidable.
We
at
weren't
all.
getting the additional on the 7.
It's like even last year when we adjusted some lines, like now we purchase all of our Chromebooks, for example, through BOCES. We didn't in the past.
Okay, all right. And that's the kind of work that our budget office is doing
Yeah, absolutely.
to see that we get back the most money that we can.
Absolutely.
Okay, okay, good. Thank you for that. And finally, to slide number 10. This one is the biggest one. Unfortunately, because that's where we have, this is curriculum. So that's where we have most of our education.
No, that slide 9 is curriculum.
What's that?
I'm sorry, slide 9, no, you're right, 10, sorry.
Right, do I have the correct one?
You're correct. No, you're correct.
Okay,
I had my backups in the wrong order.
okay. So this is the one where we see the most pain. But again, here's the one where I had the question about the furniture. But again, you're telling me that this is going to be mostly for the student's benefit.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's where I've noticed a $3,000 purchase and then a $15,000 purchase. Okay. Music supplies, we had a significant music supply purchase last year, as I recall, because we had some damage.
It's an instrument. Yeah, I don't know if it was last year or the year before.
It was the year before. It was the year before?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I do see that we took some money out of that, and I'm assuming because we already made the replacements last year.
Yeah, if you look at these multiple lines, a lot of them are either at 0 in terms of the net change or negative. Because this is when I said we went through literally every line item.
Yeah.
I want to thank, not just Ms. Segee, but Ms. O'Hagan. She came in and in her capacity as Assistant Superintendent for Instruction and Curriculum to really go and meet with all the directors and teachers to see exactly what we kind of can chip away at. And you'll see that it's pretty much across the board.
And what I'm looking at is the aid positions, and I just hope that's not going to affect the classroom, because when you see the different aid positions that are proposed to be cut, it just to see it in writing now, it just concerns me that it's not going to affect the result in the classroom, and I just hope we pay attention to the results of what's going to happen. Also, with respect to the librarians, I had this question for you earlier, that I guess with bump and retreat, I'm going to call it, that's what it's called in the county with civil service, because of seniority. It appears that there's a position in the librarian positions, that one position is going to be eliminated that shouldn't be eliminated, but you're going to look into that.
Yeah, no, so we're looking to reduce the number of librarians in K-3 buildings, but not at the secondary buildings.
It appears to me on this chart that one in the high school is eliminated, but you'll look into that. It just appears to me on this chart that it is eliminated.
I will look into it, but
Okay.
Right now in our conversations, we're not looking to impact the high school library.
Okay. some books for some books all through all the schools are being eliminated in the budget. Is that because we're satisfied with the books that we currently have?
Just like the same with like conferences, we're looking to do a moratorium for 1 year in the purchasing of new books.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say we could always use new books. I'd be kind of, as an educator, that's kind of a silly thing for me to say.
Okay.
But there are certain things that like are not absolutely necessary. And so it's that's where we started chipping away at to see how we sort of navigate this next school year, see where we land. But yeah, those are just represent new books.
Okay.
And a lot of like the platforms we're using, much to my dismay, are, you know, digital. And so, but we, you know, part of our strategic plan that we'll launch is getting kids to read more actual books, engage in actual writing, handwriting and stuff. So we're going to be moving away from technology a little bit in classrooms. That's our intention. But no, so yeah, we're doing a moratorium on new books to a certain extent, as well as like conferences and stuff, as we suggested before.
And I see our mental health providers are left intact, which I think is strong, because, you know, certainly I think our mental health program is very much needed. There is a reduction at Frank P. Long. Can you explain that reduction?
I think it's a salary differential. Off the top
Is
of my
that
head.
all it is?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, good. I'm on the last page. There was a transfer in the overall lines of transfer of food services and then to special aid for a total of $300,000 from the overall budget. And so that just means you had enough money in this line to satisfy it, and then you just needed to move it to elsewhere?
Yeah, so I believe that's just to cover the cost of lunches should the federal funds, so we always budget for it. Last couple of years we haven't used it, so that goes to our fund balance.
Okay.
But you have to have it allocated just in case things change with it, you know, because part of the subsidies we get for our free and reduced lunch comes from the federal government.
Okay. And then my last question is, this, you know, I've been on this board long enough, this is my 8th year on the board. The board always, you know, quivers at that appropriated fund balance. And this is the first time that we're at $5 million. I mean, the most we ever had to use was $4 million.
That's not accurate.
It isn't?
We've gone as high as 7 before.
And that was before my time?
Yes.
Okay. So in my time, it's the most we've ever had to go to. So, so that's a little unnerving, but that we're comfortable with that number?
Yeah, it's another strategy we use to sort of help reduce the staff reductions. I don't know if that's appropriate English. Hayes can help me out, that redundant. But yeah, we wanted to make sure that we could salvage as much as possible. And so that's why we kind of elevated that. When we initially looked at the budget process, we were thinking about actually reducing it. I think we had initially proposed something like $4 million. And we looked at going back to $4 million, but we feel comfortable to get us through this year to go up to the $5 million.
Yeah, we were always like at about 3.75 to 4.
Last couple of years was 4.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been a really tough and trying process. You know, none of this has been easy. I certainly empathize with anybody who's been affected, but I can give assurances that, you know, our programs will go on, and that's really was kind of our sort of strategy and our mindset throughout this entire process, as difficult as it is. So and here we are. You know, it's you know, one of the things that we're sort of charged with is the financial stability of the district too. And so we have to sort of project and sort of make sure we start off in a position that helps us navigate, you know, another year of challenges that will come. Because again, there's a 3-year sort of span. We're in the first year of it, next year is year 2, and one more year where we have those debt service payments that amount almost like $7 million and a drop of building aid. And so after the 26-27 school year, which sounds very futuristic, a lot of that debt service payment will drop. And so, and hopefully by that time, we'll have some completed capital projects and we'll start receiving aid as well. So that's the hope. Like I said, we're going to be breaking ground with the energy performance contract this summer. That's another big increase that you noted, Trustee Felice. So once we start seeing the savings, and it's a little misleading because we're also going to have to pay for that work, but the idea is the savings pay for the work initially, so it's like a net sort of zero impact on the budget. But all the other capital improvement projects, which are right now we have almost $6 million of approved projects that will be completed in the next school year, not counting the additional capital reserve vote we're proposing.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you for your diligence, Trustee.
Any other trustees? No?
I want to ask my
You
usual
can.
question.
How about it?
I can't hear the answer to this enough. This budget provides money for us to continue to provide all the courses and services to our students that we have this year, along with the plans for the dual language program and the new courses at the high school.
That is correct. The only caveat to that is we're kind of changing the strategy for sixth grade dual language and making it more intense language instruction. So whereas from K to 5, kids get instruction in all content areas, we sort of want to start promoting our skills by literacy. So the idea is to get them into like really intensive language instruction in sixth grade. Then they'll take their proficiency test, which can earn them a high school credit. So what we did, we structured the middle school a little differently. Students currently can earn up to 4 high school credits in middle school, which is studio art, biology, algebra, and the foreign language.
Okay. And I just wanted to make a comment about how much I appreciate the efforts that the administration and particularly the business office has done, bringing in this BOCES services so that we do qualify for aidable services through them, and that saves a lot of money. I also wanted to comment about the conferences, because I hear what my fellow trustees says about it. I can't say she's wrong, but I can say there's another side to that I would be leaning on, and that is I think you can't underestimate the importance of having a collegial environment outside the district among other experts in the field. And it's been a great way the last couple of years for our educators to have a light shown on South Country so that other districts are seeing how capable we are and what good things are coming out of our district. So you might not be able to put a dollar figure on it, but I'd like us to keep that in mind when you go to spend money. And, you know, there is a value to that.
And to your point, you know, it's about return on investment. And there are some things that are worth the investment. I'm certainly creating a shine on South Country. You know, Jackie O'Hogan behind me has done, you know, national conferences and presented on behalf of South Country. We also glean a lot of sort of best practices from them. But you have to be mindful and, you know, really be kind of very deliberate to Trustee Felice's point about, you know, the conferences we're don't approve. I also want to give a sort of a credit to everybody who's been involved in this, the trustees who've called me and asked questions, and you know, Ms. Felice and Ms. Hayes and everybody on the board who's just reached out and had questions and asked about different sort of programmatic changes and budgetary questions, because it has been a difficult process. I also want to thank the BTA for their input as well. You know, I speak to Mr. Brady a lot, and we try to advocate as much as possible together during this difficult time. And I totally appreciate the position of the BTA. And all of our collective bargaining units, you know, everybody's kind of so sharing in this sort of process. And, you know, the idea is to sort of move forward, to rise to the occasion, to meet the challenge, and to continue producing, you know, quality students, you know, with good post-secondary outcomes. That's kind of, we're going to continue, we're doing the good work.
Great. Thank you. Any cards for? Okay, that's it. Open the floor for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Barry, seconded by Mr. Little. All in favor? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Good night, everybody. We'll see you on May 20th.